Good afternoon. I can see you're really excited to see me. So I don't often read my slides before presenting. It's just a thing that I do terrible. If I say anything that's different to what's on the slide, then the slide is lying. So my name is Andrew. I am part of Terraco. Terraco does vendor-neutral data centers. We do internet exchange points and a little bit of interconnection. So I've been with Terraco for 10 years. And before that, I was a network engineer. All right, so I worked for small enterprises, and at this place we had what we called back then a data center, where it was literally just a couple of computers inside a broom closet, and that was kind of what we considered as our data center. A lot of different meanings to the word, right? It's where all the data is, in the center somewhere. Then I moved into the ISP business, and then we had a data center there, which was bigger. It was still not a proper data center. It was in a parking lot. You know these stories I like. It's just a little area that's been expanded, or put a few extra air conditioners into the room, and suddenly you've got a data center. So being a network engineer, all of that time, the worst part of the job was always the data center, because stuff keeps breaking, right? Your cooling goes off, or things start overheating, or security issues, or you start running cabling, you start running into multiple issues. So that was always the worst part of my job, was a data center. So 10 years ago, the current CEO of Terraco gave me a call. And at that time, again, I was moving between different ISPs. So he gave me a call and he said, so we got the old investors back together and we're starting a new thing. And I immediately, I've worked with these guys before and they're very good at what they do. And I said, cool, I'm in. As long as we're not building data centers. What are we doing? He said, we're building data centers. So it was a bit of a tough decision to make. But you see, the difference there was that we weren't doing, the broom closet type of thing anymore. We were building data centers. That's all we were doing. Okay, you see now everybody, I'm stuck on this thing as well, man. Okay, so that's where Terraco started, Cape Town. Cape Town is not the biggest economic hub in South Africa, but it is probably the most accepting market. A lot of innovation happens in Cape Town. A lot of the tech hubs start out in Cape Town. So we started in Cape Town because it made more sense at that stage. But we didn't really know, how far we were gonna take this thing. But we needed proof of concept. We needed something to work in a market that was willing to understand it. And it was tough. I'll show you the figures later, but it was a really tough sell, because at the time, and I'm sure a lot of you heard this before. At the time, people didn't get the whole vendor-neutral concept. You're talking about basically bricks, mortar, cooling, security, and that's it. You're not doing any services on top of that. And at the time in the market, anything data center related was part of a package, right? You buy internet services, or you buy security services, or whatever the case is. You get data centers bundled in for free, because that's not really what people were focusing on. And we came along and said, okay, well, we're doing that bottom layer, and that's all we're going to do. We're going to focus solely on the actual data center. And the idea was, guys that work in the ISP industry are very good at doing that. That's their focus. People in enterprise, they're very good at their jobs. Financial institutions, banks, for example, are very good at their jobs. But now suddenly you have this need for a data center. So what's the first thing they look at? They go to the technical team. They'll go to the sysadmin or the network engineers and say, hey, you understand this stuff. Put a cage around it, and then we've got a data center. And you've got all these guys that are sort of being stretched in multiple directions. And the difficulty, I think, was that people didn't understand, what was the purpose of an organization that does data centers only, how are you going to make money? Because I can get data center space for free, when I buy services from any of the ISPs. And back in those days, I mean, the amount of equipment that a lot of the organizations needed wasn't enough to say, well, I don't care that I'm going to be in this data center. I can easily pick up my stuff and move away, So it was, as I say, it was tough in the beginning. But it eventually worked in Cape Town. And then we moved on to Johannesburg. So I just want to give you some context here. If you have a look at this middle screen, that building over there is the Johannesburg site where it started. So that's JB East and JB1 West. Currently, the largest facility, the largest co-location facility in Africa. And it is in terms of data centers, when you're there, it's simply massive. Now, back to what people have been asking us about, why do you just focus on data centers? So that's the old site. This is the site that we've just broken ground on over here. And it is significantly larger than that one over there. The scale doesn't look correct because of the angle that it's been taken at, but it just shows the need for data center space. Okay, and then the South African story. What happened? Why did it all happen at that time? And as I said, I've been with Terraco for 10 years. We officially started in 2008, the end of 2008. We only went live at the beginning of 2009, but there were a couple of things that happened at the time. Before 2008, similar to many other places, we had one fixed operator. It was a government-controlled operator. Everybody had to buy services and capacity from the government, effectively. The cost of getting anywhere to do anything was prohibitively expensive. We're talking about 4,000 US per megabit. Compare that to the cost that we've got today. It's substantial. We did have in South Africa, we had internet exchanges. So Inks ZA, the oldest internet exchange on the continent as well. They were there, but the large telcos refused to peer. So the people with all of the content didn't even want to be part of the association that was running the internet. It was all of the smaller guys that got together and did whatever they could. And of course, there was not a lot of content. That's a chicken and egg kind of thing, right? If you're struggling to get onto the internet, content isn't really that valuable to you, because sitting trying to watch YouTube and have it buffer all of the time, it's a bad experience on both sides. So it's not as valuable, it's not as valuable. So what happened then was that the market effectively became deregulated. And this wasn't because the government wanted to do something good for the country. There was a company that actually took the communications ministry to court and won. And so overnight, you had suddenly hundreds of newly licensed operators, internet service providers. It meant that people could actually start digging up the roads and provide or putting in their own infrastructure. And so now you have all of these service providers that just suddenly exploded overnight, and they needed somewhere to be. So it was the perfect timing for our business, and it played a large part in our reason for existence. And then obviously things changed very rapidly after that. We have significantly more content available in country. As you saw earlier, we have 6 internet exchange points, 2 exchange point operators. So it's Inks ZA and then obviously NAP Africa. Interconnection is now actually a thing. So very brief timeline, just to put it all into context. We are currently that image that I showed you earlier. I think by the time that we have completed that build, since the start of the operation, we would have spent, I think it's $4.5 billion on just on data center builds and infrastructure. Okay, and then the growth timelines. As I said, this is white space. So that's white space being where you can actually put down equipment, network equipment, servers, and that sort of thing. So it started off very small. And our Cape Town facility initially was 500 square meters. And I think at the moment, currently in total, I think we've got about 15,000 square meters of space. Obviously, a huge jump in there where our Bredell facility went live, which is a massive wholesale data center. Available power also grown significantly. To put it into perspective there, I don't know if you can see, but we're currently, I think, at about 28 megawatts of power at our current builds. With the new one, the picture that you saw over there, that's going to add an additional 60 megawatts of power. And here's the difficult one, right? So that starts at 2009. You'll see 2009 to 2010, we had 3 clients. Now, you can sing and dance as much as you like about explaining the neutral thing, but it becomes incredibly difficult when you've only got 3 people inside your data center, right? Because they can only interconnect to each other so many times, and that's once. So it was a tough first year, you know, and we spent all of our time in the beginning having to explain the benefits of having a neutral facility, and it's tough. But as you can see, you know, it's the same as an internet exchange, right? If you've got your first 3, then suddenly you have an internet exchange officially, and you know, you just got to get to that critical mass, and as soon as you're over that hill, it's just exploded. And one of the parts that we didn't initially anticipate as being that important was the actual interconnection. We look back at it now and we think, well, how did we miss that it was going to be such a big thing? Our first facility in Cape Town, because of the uncertainty of the market, our structured cabling there was colored by the branding of each of the operators that at that time actually had license and capability to put infrastructure in the ground. You know, so you had different colored patch panels because we kind of assumed that people would inevitably just buy something from one of these 4 or 5 people. But it just didn't work out like that. So yeah, 2014, 2,800 interconnections. And as of now, 12,500 interconnects. When you say interconnects, these are physical cables interconnecting networks within our facilities. So it taught us a lot about not creating a mess. Again, interconnection growth up and to the right, kind of boring. You can see here that Johannesburg has significantly outstripped everybody else. I mean, if you understand South Africa, you'll know that that's all of the business is. One of the other interesting things over there is that the market verticals. When we started, you know, once we got past that whole concept or getting that concept into the market, it was easy to get the ISPs to come into the facility. So we rapidly gained a lot of ISPs, which in itself is not necessarily, I mean, it also presented its own challenges, right? Because ISPs didn't necessarily at that stage need to interconnect with each other that much. If you think about it, ISPs are traditionally more eyeballs. So, you know, it's all come in phases. We initially got all the ISPs and suddenly the facilities started looking more attractive to content, okay? And then content starts coming in because there's eyeballs. And as more eyeballs, as more content comes in, more eyeballs come in. In fact, more eyeballs are generated just because of the positive effect on the market. I mean, we are seeing new ISPs coming up in South Africa, you know, monthly, guys, because of the openness of the market and because there's so much open and shared or open infrastructure, it's incredibly easy to start an ISP these days. Okay, and then yeah, financial is a big one. Obviously, the banks, as I said, are, you know, getting to a point where they're saying, well, we're a financial institution. We shouldn't be spending all of our time trying to run a data center. It's not easy. Okay, and what's growing the growth that we're seeing, you know, and we speak specifically about growth because we talk a lot about the scale of what we're currently building, the scale of what we have in Johannesburg, and how we're doubling it up every couple of years. And I mean, the easiest way to say this is you've all got a cell phone in your hands, you've got a bunch of laptops on the tables, yeah. You know, regardless of where your stuff is, you know, if it's in the cloud or if it's in your private data center or whatever the case is, everything touches the data center. Everything you do, you know, your WhatsApps or your emails or whatever messaging apps you do, or Facebook or LinkedIn, it's all in a data center somewhere. Whether you call it the cloud or just a data center, it is there. Everything has gone digital. The other driving factor that we're seeing is because everything has gone digital so quickly, is that, as I mentioned, people don't necessarily have the patience or the skills to run their own data centers. And then, of course, so, you know, we've spoken about this for a long time about whether we should say the cloud is here or the cloud is coming or the cloud is sort of here. I don't know if, I don't think Tinker's in the room here, but, you know, the cloud is definitely coming. You know about Microsoft Azure has built in South Africa. Amazon is busy building in South Africa. And I mean, you'll see AWS and Azure there. We've just signed with Google as well to do the Google Cloud. So it's here, you know, in different forms. Currently at the moment, these two have got their direct connect and express route services. So effectively what it means is that you now have the ability to do an Ethernet connection directly onto their backbone. The regions still sit in West Europe or in Dublin, right? So there's a slight improvement in latency. You do get SLAs on the link, so you know it's attractive to, you know, to banks and a lot of the enterprises, because there is that sort of feeling of additional protection. But it is the first step, right? It's generally the first step. They would, these large content networks and cloud providers would extend their networks into a region, you know, as a first step to actually deploying the cloud in the region. Why South Africa? You know, I think a lot of us understand that the southern region, South Africa, is where a lot of the stuff has been deployed. There's a lot of activity in the east, Mombasa, you heard about earlier, and then obviously in Nigeria as well. And it's just because of the geographic location of this area gives these guys the ability to serve a lot of the neighboring countries quite easily. And obviously, you know, it does require openness. It does require you know, things like neutral data centers. I think it was Frank who was saying earlier that some of the content providers didn't want to be here because there isn't any truly neutral data center. Okay, so yeah, and as I was saying, these are these cloud on-ramps that they're offering. And I see Mark just walked into the room, so yeah, I think we're going to have a long discussion about this sort of thing later. But you know, this is just the ability, as I said, for you to take an Ethernet connection and connect up to the cloud, make it as easy as possible. We've done a lot of integration with these guys, so it's now become literally a few clicks of a button, and you can have, you know, your cloud ready to go, interconnected. You can extend your current network across a tunnel to the cloud, basically. Yeah, and that's live, obviously, Johannesburg, Cape Town, and just an example. So as I said previously, and this is where the difficulty is currently, because of all of these direct connects and express routes and that sort of thing that's come in, we've had to actually go and do an additional service layer on top of what Terica offers, which is called Exchange. It's basically an Ethernet exchange, and it's what enables us to do this one-click integration with clouds. And you know, again, it's either across this or across a physical cross connection. Important to remember, again, as I said, these regions are still not yet live. Microsoft is almost ready. Amazon is building, and Google always a step behind. But one other thing I also want to say, and I'll go back to that initial slide. It's you know, we always make the mistake of talking about the cloud. We say the cloud is coming, or the cloud is here, or the cloud is reversing, or whatever the case is. We forget that we're talking about the big players. Right? We've seen a number of cloud providers go live in South Africa. I mean, these guys are doing pretty much the same thing. You know, they're offering the same kind of services. They just don't have the big name attached to it. So I will correct myself and say that the cloud is in fact here. In South Africa, we'll call it the South African cloud. There are a number of cloud providers that are there doing the same thing, you know, interconnecting in the same way. So, you know, and this has also changed the way that we deal with business. You know, no longer are we talking only to ISPs and you know, content providers. We're suddenly sitting in front of enterprise. Sitting in front of banks. You know, there's a number of large banks in South Africa that are just shutting down all of their data centers and moving into wholesale. So it's, you know, it's changed the way that we deal with the market. We're sitting in front of enterprise network teams, you know, helping people with you know, cloud strategies and that sort of thing. And this is difficult because, you know, I go back to the size of what we're building. And I gave a talk at a electrical engineering association a couple of years back, and this is when, you know, the cloud wasn't understood necessarily. And one of the questions that came up afterwards is said, "It's great that you guys are building these data centers, and you know, cool to see how everything fits together. But isn't your business irrelevant now that everything's moving to the cloud?" And the easy answer back then is to say, well, it doesn't matter because it's going to be in a data center anyway, right? And we thought that was the solution. We thought that was the answer that you gave to that question all of the time. It just seemed too easy, but it isn't really. You know, it's it definitely changes the way that you have to think about business, and you have to change. It changes the way that you think about business. You know, like the carriers are impacted by it. ISPs. There's a big knock-on effect on ISPs. Now, I'm not saying these are negative things. I'm saying that there's a hell of a lot of new opportunities to come up, but it just changes. You know, you have to think about things differently. And I still don't think that we necessarily understand the cloud. You know, you see a lot of the memes that are still going around saying there is no cloud, it's just somebody else's computer. And, you know, I always say we all laughed at that thing because it made us feel better about the fact that somebody else also didn't understand it. You know, so I'm like, oh, okay, I see. You think the same way as I do. And I just, you know, it's not until you actually sit down and you touch and feel the cloud and use it and go onto it and connect to it and that sort of thing. And it's only then when you start really understanding what it's about. And I think it's going to take, still going to take us a bit of time to reach that point where people understand it. But it is what's happening, and it's going to increase quite significantly. What we see in Africa, we do see vendor-neutral facilities in the future. There's a lot happening, as I said, in Mombasa at the moment, and a couple of neutral facilities going up. Same thing is happening in Nigeria, Ghana, you know, all over the place. This is happening. I think people are starting to understand the separation. Okay, and again, I go back to the point of saying that everything that you do on the internet, you know, needs several layers of things to happen. And at the base of all of that is your data center. At the base of all of that is the ability to interconnect and join networks together. Yeah, and you know, you're seeing a lot of fiber being rolled out everywhere. Yeah, it's all part of the pie. It all leads to more data centers happening. And I think that is me. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, hi. I'm here from SICOM. Good to know. As we know, the big guys like Microsoft, AWS, you have told us. So I think a couple of times you have seen that although they're appearing there, but not a lot of content from these guys is there. I know it's not upon you maybe to force them to put the traffic there or most of their content there, but can we use you as well to try and tell them that I think on this side we are ready for their content and they can load as much so that we don't appear at NAP and then they route us international again to get the most of their content.
Yeah, look, and I mean, this is the reality. So, as I mentioned earlier, the other part of our business, which is actually registered as a separate entity, is NAP Africa, which is our internet exchange business. And we've got something like 350 networks connecting and peering and exchanging traffic. And Microsoft is being used as an example, right? So Microsoft has extended their backbone into the country. And I'm saying this to try and get Mark to, because I see that look on his face. But you know, the difficulty here, you need to look at this from different perspectives, right? If I'm a small ISP and I peer at NAP Africa, I can peer directly with Microsoft. The fact that it's still being backhauled internationally with only some of the content being served locally, it is beneficial to that small guy. If you look at it from his perspective, because it's no longer going by transit. Obviously, at the different layers, it does present a problem. But I still maintain that extending their networks into South Africa and effectively onto the continent is still it's a first step. Right? And we saw this with Microsoft. Microsoft came a couple of years ago, I think 2014, I think, and we knew then this was a backbone extension onto the continent, and it was from that point on that the actual design and procedures started for the actual deployment of an Azure region. We're seeing the same thing with Amazon as well, and the same model. You know, to get all the bits and pieces in place, and then do a full deployment at a later stage. Not this, you know, it's not necessarily happening fast enough, but it is happening.
Thanks, Martin Kasikon. Thank you for the talk, Andrew. I think so. Tomorrow we'll have a panel on a slightly related topic on why data center infrastructure, the cloud, and fiber, latency, and so forth is key to asking the question whether we should, as Africans, continue to invest in Europe, and whether us doing so is removing the incentive for Europe and North America and all the content players from investing in Africa. And I think the data center piece is a large part of that. I think South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria have been identified by most of the content community as being the key locations where there's enough traffic. But even with that, and with reasonable development in data center infrastructure, as well as the accompanying legislation and regulation in these markets. I mean, Nigeria is a bit special, but it's not better than it was a couple of years ago. We're still not seeing that translate. And I think what Andrew did here was obviously show us that, at least in the data center infrastructure side, the problem has largely been solved. Not all over Africa, but the thing with Africa is that you don't have to be everywhere now. You just need to be in a few key regions, which is East, South, and West, that is to get some traction. So I don't want to give away too much for tomorrow's presentation, tomorrow's panel, but I think, do you think that you are doing enough, at least at your level, at the co-location level, to provide incentive for more content, and not just the big players, not the Microsofts and the Apples and the Googles, talking about the little website that's important to an enterprise in Africa that is owned by some service? Or do you think that you should be doing that and then also encouraging our own homegrown services, our own clouds, our own compute infrastructure that people can buy because it's actually closer to home and works, and not because it doesn't have a big brand name behind it?
Yeah. Look, So just a couple of points there. I mean, again, to highlight, the data center is part of the core of that infrastructure. And a lot of places we've been to in Africa, people have said to us, please help me build a co-location facility in my country. It doesn't work everywhere. If you've got a state-run network that isn't in control of everything, it just doesn't make sense anymore, because you're going to build this facility and you're only going to have local people, and you're never going to attract anybody to come into that facility. So there's a lot of things that need to happen to make it work. And yes, again, I've done this myself. I found myself doing this all the time. When you speak about the cloud, it's only those three big names that come to mind, right? There's a lot of large cloud providers, but you all kind of think of those big three. And we forget that we do have cloud providers on continent, born and raised here. Like I said, they're doing the same thing. I mean, as Terraco, we are cloud users, but we don't use Microsoft or Azure or Google Cloud. We use locals. We use locals to run our our IT infrastructure and our business systems and that sort of thing. And you're getting a lot of the same thing. There are certain differences, but it works. If you need cloud now, today, we can get it, and we can get it from a number of places. Are we doing enough? You must remember that Terraco, at our base, we sell space, and I think probably back at the beginning we thought that's all we were ever going to do was sell space. We find ourselves now sitting in front of a lot of different people, and speaking about strategies and who they interconnect with, how to make things work. So, there is a lot of work that's there. I will say what has changed now is, those conversations have changed now, and it's because of cloud. And as much as you want to say that the big three are sort of coming, almost here, never here, whatever the case is, whichever stage of development they're in, the fact that they are entering the market has gotten people interested in cloud again. And, a couple of years ago, we all heard all these cloud talks. You got all these conferences and people were talking about clouds and how amazing it is and how easy it is. And people got bored of it because we didn't have anything like that. So we kind of forgot about it. And that's, again, where all those jokes came from. It's just somebody else's computer, haha. The fact that they're now making a splash and hitting the headlines has gotten people interested in cloud again. And it has also put us in front of, as I said, a lot of those enterprises. And now you can start having those discussions about, hey, did you know that you also have other options? You must remember that going onto the cloud doesn't mean you have to just forklift everything and put it on the cloud or on one cloud. There's various different ways of entering the cloud. And it's not a one size fits all. A number of our clients have got their compute and various things spread across multiple clouds, whether it is the big guys or the small guys. It's fit for purpose. There's a need for everything, but you can't just lift everything up and chuck it onto the cloud. So it is a developing market at this stage, or it's a developing concept. And I always compare it to Terraco and the whole concept of neutrality. Was that first 1 or 2 years where we struggled to explain what we were doing to people. I think the same thing is happening with cloud now. Certainly the people that we've interacted with, the enterprises and the banks, haven't gotten it. Right? Everybody's been talking about cloud because some guy at the top heard about cloud and said, go and do it. It's the same thing as SDN. A lot of people come to us and say, hey, we got a whole new SDN strategy. And we say, oh, so what is it? No, we're still looking. Yeah, and it's a thing because it's a buzzword now. And cloud was just a buzzword for us for a long time. And suddenly, here it is. You can touch it, you can feel it. And people are interested in it again. And so, that gives the local cloud providers a lot of leverage to work with and a lot of momentum to work with, because you know, if you have latency sensitive stuff, or if you're worried about, you know, in South Africa, the Poppy Act or GDPR type stuff, it's a perfect opportunity for the local cloud people to get into that gap, right? Because there's no real timeline for when the actual region clouds are going to go live. At the moment, it's just I guess, you know, it's to make it easier to connect to the cloud at the moment, what they're doing. But it is the first step, and it is not the last step.
Thanks for your presentation, Andrew. My name is Mukam from Afinic. You've just identified that one of the reasons you've had problems with some countries is because of the regulatory environment. What I'm interested in knowing is there something that TerraCode does to be more proactive in trying to fix the regulatory issue, or are you just leaving it to market forces, especially when there are strong incumbents involved?
Yeah, okay. So that's a tough question, right? In South Africa, the regulations work for us. They've helped us to grow to the size where we are now. There's also the requirement of a certain scale to make something like this work, and you know, something in that regulation needs to change. And it's not just a case of saying, well, the regulations are open now we can suddenly start doing this thing. You need to have a certain number of organizations or ISPs, you know, in place to make it viable. You know, from my point of view, it is difficult at scale. And it's like Mark said, a lot of content has identified certain regions as being the place that they need to be. So, yeah, we're certainly following those regions. The question about other regions, other countries, it becomes difficult. You know, it's Africa. It's 54 different ways of doing business, and every country has a different challenge, and every country has different opportunities. So, yeah, it's a tough one. But I think we're going to probably cover that in the panel tomorrow. So.
Freddie Mrema from Tigo, Tanzania, operating in the only tier 3 data center in Tanzania. You mentioned TerraCode being a carrier-neutral data center. Hope Frank approved that. What are the key characteristics making TerraCode data center carrier-neutral data centers?
Okay, so we don't offer any services above layer 2. So we build data centers. This is, as I said, bricks and mortar. We do the cooling, we do the security. I'm talking about physical security. And we do interconnection within that facility. I guess you could call that all the layer 1 stuff, right? And when I say interconnection, I mean, if you want to interconnect you to Flex Optics, I'm going to run a physical fiber from your rack or your patch panel to his. I don't have any equipment in the middle of that. I'm not selling you a MPLS circuit across the data center, kind of thing. Beyond that, we have the Internet Exchange, which is layer 2. And then we have the Ethernet Exchange, which is, I see that's the primary means of connection to the cloud services that are available in the facility. And what makes specifically a data center carrier neutral is that I don't have any skin in the game. When it becomes to conversations between my clients, okay? So if you think about it this way, there are a lot of facilities that call themselves carrier neutral, but they're owned by carriers. The difficulty then is that if you want to run that cross connect from you to him, you've got to phone a carrier to arrange that cross connect. With me, I don't care. I just want to cross connect in because it's revenue for me to get that cross connection in. But I don't care why you're connecting to him, and I don't have an alternative product for you. If you are connecting to him, that's your own business. I'm not involved in that at all. It doesn't affect me other than give me a bit more revenue. I'm not going to say to you, hey, by the way, I know that you're trying to buy this service, but I've got one that's slightly better. And I can make it a bit cheaper for you at the same time. We do not compete with any of our clients. That is one of the most important. And you know, since day one, the whole neutral thing has been drummed into us from top to bottom. You know, we have a lot of clients coming to us saying, I need a service with the following characteristics. Can you tell me who I should be speaking to in your facility? Which carrier, which network provider, we can't. I can't tell you that. I can give you a link to a marketplace that we have where all of our clients are registered. And you can go and search for the product that you want, and you can then get the contact details for those people. So if I were to start favoring TCOM, for example, then CCOM's competitors might be upset. And that's the neutrality. That's why I have to remain neutral. I can't favor anybody. And just to close off, I always say to everybody when they ask me this, I say, well, the easiest way to explain it is because they say to me, oh, you have to remain neutral you have to treat everybody the same way. And I say, well, the easiest way to do that is say that I'm neutral. I hate all of my clients equally.
Thank you. Having said that, if I'm meeting the layer one, physical, I own all the infrastructure, own all the facilities. I allow you to do a combination between the racks and between ISPs, and you're only missing the internet exchange point. Does that disqualify you from being carrier neutral or still qualify you to be a carrier neutral?
Does having an internet exchange change your neutrality?
Yes.
No, not at all. Look, it's just, you know, we found out very early on that an internet exchange was a very good way to make a data center attractive. It was a very good way to get people interconnecting.
Sure.
But it's not necessarily related. The reality is that an internet exchange point needs to be somewhere that is in a neutral facility. And we saw this in the South African market as well. There was a very strong relationship between the growth of NAP Africa and the fact that it was in a truly carrier neutral facility. But you must remember that an internet exchange is just a way of interconnecting within a facility. Sure. It's the same concept as a physical interconnection. It's just a shared fabric where you are able to connect to all of the other members with less physical cabling, right? Just an easy way to get pairing going. So it doesn't make you neutral or not neutral. But if you go and have a look at the most successful internet exchange points in the world, you will find that they are all in neutral facilities. Okay, thank you very much. Enjoy your coffee.